Something odd is happening in the world of football. Something that is suppressing and crippling the quintessential organizations in the NFL. Teams that once experienced waves of W's, championships, and dynasties now have turned the tide to years of drought and consistent failure. Think of the worst teams inside the NFL. Now think about just how long they have actually been bad. Maybe a faint glimmer of hope with a random 9-win season, yet never any real foundation to build a contender off of. Well, why is that? These teams are consistently bad, so they should be consistently picking higher in the draft, getting the more desirable players coming into the NFL, and should generally have more money to spend come free agency. Yet, no dice. Now I thought about this why, and the most rational suspect would have to be the NFL draft, with nearly 90% of the league once being an NFL draft pick. So I studied the NFL draft. I studied the success stories, the bust, the data, and what I found in my investigation isn't just a series of bad scouting or bad coaching decisions resulting in years of losses and disappointment. What I found revealed that the NFL draft may be nothing more than a never-ending ploy, a systematic trap that is actually setting up the most needful teams in the NFL to fail. Now, it's no secret as the NFL season progresses, preparations for the following season begin earlier for some teams than others.
Guys, 3-13 against 13-3. Yeah.
With playoff hopes and team performances, it's not hard to distinguish a Super Bowl contender from a team amidst a rebuild. And in every season, we find teams that subtly lose games seemingly on purpose, otherwise known as tanking a season. And this is actually smart because the NFL draft isn't a lottery system. Teams with the worst records obtain the better draft spots like the first overall pick. And in this year's sprint to 14 losses, we saw coaches actually being fired for losing this race. To be fair, these draft spots are the distant hope for fans and franchises who watch their teams suck all year long. And when all you have to do is continue to lose in a year full of losing to protect that draft spot, well, you can see where the frustration stems from. But are these advantage draft spots really that more valuable than the others? This year, New England fell from the 1st to the 4th overall pick, and it seemed like the world had ended for Patriots fans. But according to years and decades of collected data from the Pro Football Reference, you can actually track personal and team statistics weighted over a player's career to calculate the value produced by that player over the stretch of their career. And this metric is referred to as WAV or WAV. And come to find out, historically speaking, the 4th overall pick actually provides the second most value to a team, contradicting the consensus belief that, well, the 1st overall pick is the most valuable, with the rest systematized in succession. And this isn't the only outlier of valuable draft spots. In terms of career value, the 13th overall pick is actually the 8th overall best spot to draft. The 7th overall pick is actually the 13th best spot to draft. And picks 33, 34, 36, and 37 all rank within the top 30 most valuable picks, meaning early second round picks are actually more productive than some first round guys. But through all of NFL's history of trading draft picks, we see these premium draft spots being valued upwards of 5 times more than the early second round. And when you add money into the mix, these draft spots begin to sound even more like a scam. Now, Michael McKelvey made a video on the NFL draft as well, where like myself, he did a deep dive into an abundance of data. Now, of course, I encourage you to watch his full report, but in that video, he examined drafted players' performances and compared them with the amount of compensation they received. If you didn't know, the higher a player is selected in the NFL draft, the more compensation that player is entitled to. And because NFL teams have a salary cap, this is viable information when determining which draft picks are actually more valuable than the others. And another thing McKelvey mentioned was that the value of these higher draft picks are further exhausted when teams trade for these picks, because not only are teams forced to pay more to the player drafted because ultimately it is a higher draft selection, but you are also having to pay to possess the higher pick as well. Now, of course, there are success stories of players selected a touch earlier in the draft that perform leagues and bounds better than the player selected after him at the same position. Michael McKelvey's example for this was Peyton Manning and Ryan Leaf. The 2024 version, I guess, could be Ladd McConkey and Jalen Polk, where in their first seasons, Ladd McConkey became a 1,000-yard receiver, and Polk only amassed to 12 receptions, despite only being one wide receiver selection apart. But what are the odds of this actually happening? The odds that a player selected first will perform better than the next player drafted at that same position. According to McKelvey, decades of collected data in NFL drafts, only 52%. But knowing the extensive price tag that comes with these premium draft spots, why would any NFL team trade up into possessing one? Through data, we know that actually you may be better off drafting a little bit later, but yet in the last decade or so, we've seen it happen just over 10 times. And in almost every instance, NFL teams seem to be making the same mistake. Now, specifically for 8 times in the last 16 years, an NFL team has moved up in the draft to select a presumably better player than the one to go after. And how many times do you think this has panned out? Where there was Mark Sanchez,
and it was the backside of Brandon Moore that knocked the ball.
Mitchell Trubisky,
Trubisky's pass is picked off. And we see the Bears taking over with Nick Foles.
Robert Griffin III, Trey Lance, Sam Darnold, Carson Wentz, Jared Goff, and Bryce Young. Only one still remains on the same team that drafted him. Only 2 have lasted on that team for more than the 4-year rookie contract. Only 2 have playoff wins, and halfway through this season, only 2 were still starting NFL quarterbacks. Yet all this information kinda goes to the wayside when GMs and NFL organizations are picking for the future. Why is that? There has to be some reason teams are willing to take this massive gamble, because remember, historically teams value these premium draft spots 5 times more than an early second rounder. And for what? A mere 50-50 shot that the guy they take is going to be better than the next. Well, there's one thing that each of these players drafted have in common, and there's one thing that each of these teams believe they desperately need to compete: a franchise quarterback. Now, there's no doubt a franchise quarterback is something that most, if not every good team in the NFL has. If you look at the league today, you can see countless examples of teams that just don't operate as well as they've proven to be without their starting quarterback. A quarterback touches the ball just about every snap and can single-handedly win or lose you a game. Therefore, technically, it is the most impactful position. And this has been drilled into our heads by every analyst, GM, coach, team owner, and sports network for a long time. Since 2011, the consensus concept to rebuilding a team was draft a great quarterback early and let him lead you to success on a cheaper rookie deal. And this is backed up by the over 40 quarterbacks drafted in the first round since. But this idea that you need to draft high for the right quarterback to save your organization may be the exact brainwashing that has led to years of constant failure and losses. Only one of these quarterbacks have won a Super Bowl. The teams that drafted them made it to the playoffs only 19% of the time, and the average tenure on that team only 3.5 years, half a year under the NFL rookie contract. So all this draft capital spent on possessing the higher pick, the increased compensation that now has to be paid to this higher draft selection, and with the misplaced value of certain draft picks, is this early first round high tier quarterback that you're now getting really all that much cheaper than any other quarterback in the NFL? And well, now we know that just having a quarterback isn't the end all be all, because out of over 40, only one is a Super Bowl champion. Look at it like this. In 2022, the Panthers traded up in the draft for the first overall pick. This move costed the 9th overall pick, 2 second-round picks, the 2024 first overall pick, and DJ Moore, a former first-rounder. Now, in addition, the 9th overall to the first overall is about a $16 million increase in the rookie contract pay scale. With this extensive price tag, it was already near impossible for what would become rookie Bryce Young to outperforming what cost to get him, versus a player like Brock Purdy, drafted last, no trades, and for just over $900,000. And yes, the 49ers were and still are a more talented football team than the Panthers. But part of this is because when building their team, they didn't over-exceed when acquiring a quarterback. And when that cost is so low, overachieving that level in terms of production may not be all that crazy. Tom Brady came into the league the same way, and we all know how that ended up. But waiting till the very last pick to draft a must-needed quarterback can't be a viable strategy. So where's the sweet spot? Where can teams draft their next quarterback without overextending their hands or wagering their future, while still grabbing the player the world seems to believe you need to succeed? Well, around the 10th overall pick, the predetermined pay scale drops tremendously. In 2024, the 12th overall pick, Bo Nix, is playing for under half the amount as the first overall pick, Caleb Williams. And oddly enough, in terms of our little metric, WAV, picks 8th through 13th show numbers of production that threaten the 3rd overall pick. But also, former highly scouted turned NFL rejects can begin to thrive in terms of outperforming their compensation. Quarterbacks like Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, Jared Goff, Russell Wilson, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Bo Nix, Jordan Love, Jalen Hurts are all guys that came into the league or joined their teams on a significantly lower contract than the first overall pick, Caleb Williams, or the second overall pick, Jaden Daniels, or any early first round draft pick. Even though some of these guys used to be that early first round draft pick. And the funny thing is about all of these quarterbacks is that they're all in the playoffs for this NFL season. Because when you truly get a quarterback outperforming their compensation, the flexibility with the money and the draft capital that's saved is enough to honestly build a dynasty. Think about if you spend a majority of your resources, water and fertilizer, on one plant. How can you ever grow a garden? So which team will fall for this year's NFL draft ruse? What quarterback desperate team will overextend their hand and end up with scars that will last decades? What very may be the new question to ask in every NFL draft. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed. And hey, if you want more stories like this, I got one for you right here. And oh, you can subscribe if you want even more.